It's time for TJwow.
It's time for TJwow.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Training Journal webinar. I'm really pleased to be with you today. My name is Jo Cook. I'm the Deputy Editor of Training Journal, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. What we are doing here today is we don't have any PowerPoint presentations. We don't have any kind of, quite frankly, we don't even have anything that we've set up that we're going to be talking about. We don't have anything planned other than the topic that we've got, because we think it's about conversation and about you driving that conversation with your comments and with your questions. Because, you know, I always think that the best thing about a conference or a training probably is the conversation we have over coffee or maybe in the pub afterwards. So that's what we are hoping to achieve on our webinar today. Now, you've got the chat window down on that bottom right-hand corner. We've been sharing where we are in the world and what the weather is like, so please do feel free to use that to chat with each other, to ask questions of each other, to share resources and links if you know of any really good ones. That's all excellent to go and do, so please do that. Also, what we've got is a question and answer pod. So if you have a look on the bottom of your screen, you've got a Q&A section there, and that is really good. If you have particular questions and you don't want them to get lost in the chat window, please use that and we'll make sure we promise to see them, and I'll address them as much as we can. If you've got a microphone and you want to say something, you can use that raise hand icon at the top of the screen, or let us know in the chat window, or just unmute and interrupt and say, I've got a question, I've got something to ask. We really encourage your voices. We know we've got Ryan that we're going to speak to a little bit later on, and we look forward to that. You can join us on Twitter if you want to, and if you don't want to on Twitter, that's absolutely fine if you're not into that kind of thing. We have Debbie, who is our editor. She will be tweeting away for us, and you can follow us at Training Journal, or you can go to TJwow if you want to. Our session is being recorded, and it will all be available on our webinar, along with our webinar page, along with all our previous recordings. So if you miss out, don't worry, you can go back to those. Lastly, we have our speakers here today. So we have Con from Australia, we have Issy, who is in the UK. At the moment, we've lost Neville. We're hoping to get him back. Maybe he's had connection issues like some of you guys have. So we will come back to Neville a little bit later on. Now, let me go into our main area and bring in our webcam so that you can see us all. And let me fill up the screen. And it's at this point that we're going to start having our chat around our topic. Hopefully Neville will come back to us very soon. So let me start, ladies first, with Issy. So Issy, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do in the world of learning and development.
Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. I actually run a marketing company called Nancarrow Partnerships, but we were founded in the learning and development sector. So we do a lot of work with learning providers. And from that, we started working with learning and development departments to look at the use of marketing approaches, marketing tools, as a means to increase engagement, increase communication of the L&D function and the L&D offer internally, which is something we call campaign learning, but it's an interesting alternative use of marketing tools.
Great, thank you very much. And I've just popped, I remember that you've got on Twitter, you've got an @campaignlearning Twitter handle, so people can go and follow that and find out more if they want to. So I've just popped that into the chat window. And Con, tell us a little bit about yourself and your new role that you've got down there in Australia.
Exciting. Thank you, Joe. Hello, everyone. And yes, it is evening over here in Australia. It's just gone 5 minutes past 7. And I was saying before to the guys, I do my best work in the evening. So thanks for inviting me. Yes, I've recently joined Kineo, Kineo Asia Pacific. For those in the UK, you're probably very familiar with Kineo as a brand and as an organisation. Very much award-winning e-learning and LMS platforms. So very excited to be part of that, the gang, and looking to do some great things here in Australia. But also, I have my own brand, LearnCoach, on Twitter, and a learning and performance individual. So people can hit me up on Twitter under LearnCoach. And also, Joe, every now and again, I do use a few hashtags myself, and one of them is head in the sand or head in the game. So when I see something which is good, I will tweet "Head in the Game" as a hashtag. When I see something that L&D probably needs to start thinking about and probably still keeping their head in the sand, I will tweet "Head in the Sand" as a hashtag. So some things I use in order to get my message across, which is what we're all about tonight, which is about communications.
Great, thank you, Con. And I've just shared a couple of those in the chat window. You have another hashtag you use a lot, but I don't think I have got that right. I put "We are in L and D," or is it "We are in L and D"?
It's "We are L and D," so L, N, and D.
Ah,
So WEARE, L and D.
There we go. That's it. I knew there was something like that.
A call, yeah. That's one more call to arms, where to unite the profession. So yeah, there's three I use on that sort of basis.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for that. Our topic today is, as you say, it's about communication, and you've both been very kind to write some stuff for the Training Journal website, or make a video in Con's case, to talk about different aspects of communication and how important this is in our industry, in our profession. And I've just put the question that we've got in the chat window. That's our kind of topic for conversation. So guys on the session, you've got that Q&A pod you can use, you've got that chat window to use to share your thoughts and your ideas. So what is it that you think is the most important skill? Now, I think communication is definitely up there, but I could be persuaded. So Issy, what are you thinking? Is communication the skill and competency we need in L&D, or is it something else?
I think it's important to clarify what we actually mean by communication, because communication now means something very different to what it did 20 years ago. And you can be very good at one-to-one communication or communication as a trainer, but you might not necessarily understand what it means to be good at communication to a mass audience of hundreds of thousands of people, and how to engage people in that way. I certainly think communication is a key skill, but I think there's so many aspects of it that need to be looked at. And it's a means to an end. It's not an end goal, but it's a skill to help L&D managers and departments do what they want to do.
Okay, good points. There's lots of different aspects to L&D and communication that we have to think about. So, Con, let us know what your thoughts are on that.
Look, I think Issy hit the nail on the head. I think it's wide-ranging, and it's really how you look at it and how you want to define it. Whether it's the most important skill, I think there is a number of skills in L&D we need to get across. Communications, of course, is the key to achieving. We are social beings. We are social interactors. That personal touch, that communication is very, very important in achieving outcomes. And especially when you're in an L&D department, and an internal L&D for that matter, and you're playing that business partner type of role, or you're playing that sort of broker type of role, you need to have clear, succinct communications in order to achieve the outcomes you want to get to.
Thanks, Con. So we've got some kind of differing thoughts there right at the beginning. So is communication the main thing, or is it a sub-part of what we do, and how does it impact? So I can see that loads of people are typing in the chat window, so we'll come back to some of those. And we have Neville back with us. Neville, you had a Windows update right at the last moment there. Are you there, Neville? Oh, so we'll come back to Neville, see if he's actually alive.
Sorted. Yeah, perhaps they could find a better way of communicating they're about to do it.
Yeah, maybe they could. Well, I did say communication would take on all facets today. Okay. Well, Neville, we've done some short introductions, so let's just hear a little bit about yourself. What do you do, Neville, and whereabouts in the world are you?
Right, I'm in Buckingham in the UK. Our organisation basically works with HR functions to help them understand and realise the full impact and value they provide. And then what we do through looking at various insights is work with them and the wider organisation to lift the performance of every individual team and function. That's basically what we do. We provide insight, we provide impact through transformation labs, and we provide ongoing support to organisations. It's as simple as that, really. That's what we do. We try to improve the levels of flow throughout an organisation. That's what we do.
Thank you, Neville. And, you know, with that point, our conversation around is communication the most important competency? What are your headline thoughts about that? Because we had a little bit of a chat about that before, and I get the feeling that maybe you think it's not the most important thing.
I think it underpins a number of other important things. I think one of the most important things for me at the moment, and if Amanda Dudman is actually on the call, I don't know if she is, but she tweeted yesterday in our links that communication needs to be specific, otherwise it's meaningless. And I thought that was a nice tweet in our little pre-webinar connection, because what it means is if we don't understand why we're communicating, if we don't understand the intention of the business, if we don't understand the intention of whatever learning support we're providing for the business to impact upon the business and its end purpose, then actually there's no point in communicating. So I think that deep business acumen and understanding is a very important competency, and I think what comes out of that is the need to communicate well. So many aspects of communication. I'm sure we're going to talk about many more of them through the webinar, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Neville. So communication is important, but it's around business acumen is what we're kind of looking at here. So guys, you know, in the chat window, what do you think? What's going on in your thoughts around that, around business and communication for L&D? So let's go back to a couple of comments that we've had. Sarah Bennett, thank you. She says, I agree. I think the personal skills needed to train a smallish group are very different from the skills involved in getting buy-in from a whole organisation. Well, I think we're probably all in agreement about that. Issy, what are your thoughts about those differences? Because I know that you do a lot of communication with stakeholders as well as Neville and Con. What's the difference between, you know, I've got 10 or 12 people I'm training and I'm trying to get the whole organisation to buy into something maybe a little bit different or a different way of working?
I think it's an entirely different form of communication. I agree with Neville in that communication underpins a lot of different things, and I think there's actually a long way to go, certainly from what I've seen with L&D departments in terms of understanding modern forms of communication. So when we're looking at training a small group of people, you're talking about an entirely different skill to engaging an entire organisation, and actually face-to-face communication, as useful as it is to get leadership buy-in, is not a primary communications means to engage an entire organisation. Then you have to look at something more automated, you have to look at something that is specific, that is targeted, and something actually well thought out and planned out. Obviously, from my perspective, similar to a marketing campaign, because you need to digitally engage that many people.
Okay, so I'm hearing a few things there, is that yes, those skills are different, and that actually some of that will come down to planning and knowing your audience. Some of that is about maybe digital skills, or more broadly, it could be the different ways or methods that we use to communicate. Is that a fair summary, Issy? That's
a fair summary, yes.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. So, Con, what are your thoughts about that as the difference between, in Sarah's example, the small training to a group versus kind of that bigger stakeholder buy-in across a business?
Look, I think there is a need to adjust for that type of communication. But what I was going to say earlier on was, I think with whatever communication you undertake, authenticity is the key. Whether you're in front of a whole organisation and the CEOs, or whether you're in a classroom with 10, 15 people, authenticity in your communication is key to getting that message across. And people can and do see authenticity, and they also engage with that authenticity. So for me, and I consider the chat window there, we talked about, you know, the different types of communications in the different groups. Either way, any way you skin it, any way you peel the layers off, it's all about authenticity, compassion, understanding, and empathy in the way you communicate.
I think that's really interesting, because it doesn't matter, as you say, whatever level we're at, we need some of those core skills, which goes back to that question of actually is communication and all the component parts of that the core skill that we need. Because if we don't have that, well, we can't teach our groups, we can't speak to our CEO and so on. That's an interesting point, Con, thank you. And Neville, what about from your perspective? You know, we're talking here about kind of the business acumen, which is where you started, but more from a communication point of view. How does that differ for you?
I quite like the very last thing Con just said there about authenticity, but also the empathy element. I think as a group, as an industry of trainers and learning and development professionals, we've long been conscious of the fact that there's a difference in the way people prefer to receive information, whether they be mainly visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or stats-based. I've always added the S to say that, you know, there's a different energy that says, just give me the facts and stop all this monkeying around. And we kind of need to appreciate, and I pick up on Pamela's point about global considerations here. Actually, almost wherever you are in the world, you do like to receive information if we understand that when we're working with executives one-on-one, or when we're working with a small group, or when we're even communicating to the entire organization. If we know where the dominance is, we can start to actually target appropriately. And I think there was a tweet I received this morning from a chap called David Smith that reminded me that when you speak, whatever the medium, you have to think about what voice is being heard and what message is being taken on board. And I think we sometimes don't spend enough time thinking about what it is we want to, but why it is we're trying to communicate. I think we have to start with why. It comes back to why are we actually having to communicate at all? And if we understand then what the business's purpose of us, from us, is in terms of communication and whatever learning intervention we're combining, putting together, providing
So I think we might have just lost Neville there for a moment. So hopefully he'll come back to us. Maybe there are a few communication or connection kind of issues there. So thank you very much for that, Neville. I think it's a really interesting point about marrying up communication and business. And Pamela said in the chat window around communication is changing. We're communicating far more globally. In L&D, we're now delivering virtual training, and a lot needs to be considered. Culture, language, being able to effectively engage your audience. So some of these come down to kind of communication in the training environment, as well as kind of that difference between what the business environment needs. But we need to kind of straddle both of those, I think. I think it's a really interesting area. And Pamela says, agree with Neville, and also what is important to the audience. We are communicating to. So how to deliver the message that resonates with the students, or kind of whoever that audience is. So I think that's a really important point here about knowing your audience, about what's going on there. And another kind of element to that is what Laura was saying. She says we communicate through our work by producing materials, using tools such as videos or podcasts or webinars like we are today, as well as face-to-face and one-on-one in a classroom. So, you know, we have to make sure we've got the right tone, the right voice, and all of that. So Issy, let's come back to you, because I know you do a lot of those different things as well as Con, and Con, you've got that kind of background, especially in live broadcasts, which is an area you're especially interested in. But Issy, tell me about the difference when we're communicating in different ways, whether it's a video or a podcast or an email, or how does communication differ then?
Differ in terms of how it's actually presented. So you're talking different media.
Yeah, I think so.
I think there's so many different media to engage with people that can be useful alongside any training intervention. What I'm finding really interesting in the chatter going on at the moment is this need to engage with the audience, with the learner, and as you mentioned, Joe, earlier. I think it was you that mentioned like the real empathy. And I find this sort of classic of the L&D industry, and it is very important, but it's also important to link in with some of the things that Neville is saying around really the business objectives and what are important to the leaders, what's important to the organisation, and actually L&D taking a stand in being the link between them. So understanding the ground level needs, which isn't easy when you've got a large organisation with different cultures, different priorities, different partners, and trying to bring it all together when actually, you know, what do the leaders want to change in the organisation, and trying to engage staff saying this learning is important to you because it will make your life better in this way. It's important to the organisation because it will improve us in this way. And I think that's really kind of the key overview message within any L&D communications, to engage the audience and to make sure the relevance to the business objectives is understood.
I think that's an excellent point of relevance to the business objectives. I'm definitely going to come back to that a little bit later on in the conversation. So, Con, what are your thoughts around, you know, Laura was saying about we use different mediums, different methods, and Pamela's making a great point in the chat window about we need to deliver the message so that it resonates. What are your thoughts around that? Because I know you're kind of big into social media, into live broadcast. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts.
Look, and I think Issy touched the word on engage quite a bit. I think for me, one of the key ways engagement has happened and occurs and effectively is via the ability to video. We know video is going to change learning. We're all aware of the YouTubes, we're aware of Vimeo, we know it's going to change it. But for me, it's the live video streaming that I believe and that I'm tapping into more and more to have that connection and that engagement with the audience. So whether you're periscoping the CEO, talking to a group of people live in a meeting, whether you're periscoping a keynote speaker at a session you're attending, sharing that with your audience and then communicating with them around what you've heard, what you've, you know, periscoped. It's so key to understanding how we start to move that sort of needle across from just being packaged static video production via YouTube to something more interactive and engaging via live video streaming.
Thank you. And I think, you know, we've got some of those methods for some people are quite new and quite challenging, and for other people, you know, things like the written word and the email marketing, that will be kind of something more comfortable for them. So we've got all of these different ways that we can do things. As you say, it's about kind of the engagement with the right part of the business, and it's such a big challenge and such a broad area, and I think it's really, really interesting. Go ahead, Brooke.
I just want to see that. One thing Issy said before too, I think she really hit the nail on the head about understanding the objectives of the organisation. And for those of us in L&D and you know, that live and breathe it on a daily basis, that's where performance consultancy and that as a process and as a communication tool is very important in understanding what's the pain the organisation is experiencing, connecting with the relevant people, listening to them, having empathy, like I said before, understanding what the issue is, and then thinking about potential solutions. But that involves a whole communication strategy and a whole interactive and engaging process with the relevant people in order to get to the outcomes you want to get to.
So you say
I'd
that...
also like to...
Go ahead, Issy.
Sorry, thank you. I'd like to add on to that. I think a lot of the tools that we're talking about are important, so email, Periscope and things, but I also think there is so much more communication technology out there that hasn't yet been brought in by L&D, possibly because it's slightly new and slightly intimidating, possibly partly to do with costs and things involved. But there is such an extraordinary capability of technology to actually adapt communication to different cultures and to target it. So, for instance, Periscope and videos, they have their place, and absolutely they're wonderful tools. But if you're looking to audiences of different cultures, you need something that you can easily adapt and target and change the message of, just slightly alter it, so that you're not making entirely new communication media, and then send it out and communicate it with different areas of the organisation. It's about being efficient with your communications as well as using the right ones.
Okay, great points all round. Thank you very much. And we've got Sarah has asked, could you give some examples, Issy? So Sarah, if you want to expand on that in the chat window at all, please do. So Sarah asks, can you give some examples, Issy?
Yes, I absolutely can. If we're looking at what is used in external communications at the moment, so for example, articles can be automated. And actually, if you're going online, I know that it doesn't happen in TJ, just putting this out there, and I think that's a great thing about TJ, but I know that there are a lot of media out there that literally automate articles, and they look like they're written by a human being. They are then rewritten by the computer for different audiences and for different cultures in different languages, and they're so sophisticated that people think that they're written by real people. So that's just one example of the type of technology and the ability of technology as a mass communications mean and how it's evolving, which we haven't taken on within L&D yet.
That's a great example, Issy. Thank you very much. And Sarah, if you want more examples, or if you've got examples, guys, please do let us know in the chat window. Maybe you can share how you've been doing things. Connor's talked about Periscope, which is a live broadcasting video, for instance. What tools are you using effectively? Share some ideas with us and with other people as well. Whilst new technologies are brilliant and they can be a great way for involving people, much like this webinar, you know, we're having a discussion here for our continuous professional development that we might not otherwise be able to have without this technology. Sometimes, you know, just going up to somebody's desk and having a chat can be the most effective way. So do share some of those ideas with us. So we've got a couple of comments and questions that I think are really relevant. Jan says thank you, by the way, and Sarah says thank you as well for that. So thank you very much, Issy. So Debbie, our TJ editor, says in the chat window, rather than talk about types of communication, shouldn't we be talking more about how the breakdown in communication is often the root cause of so much business failure? And as an L&D person, our communication skills need to be honed to be able to find out the problems and win over the managers and people. Con's comment on performance consulting is spot on. And linked to that, we had a question in the chat window of what tips do you have for getting the business to tell you exactly what their aim is? Sometimes they're a bit opaque. So we've got those kind of 2 points. So let's go to those. Con, first of all, you know, performance consulting, and there are a whole range of different kind of methodologies and processes we can follow, but basically getting to the point of what does the business need to avoid this issue of communication challenge. So what are your thoughts and your tips around that?
Okay, well, it's about understanding the pain. So the first sort of thing you need to appreciate is when you're having the conversation is to try to listen and pick up the cues to what is the performance issue that the business experiences. So you might do that by how's your KPIs going? Is there a particular KPI you're struggling on? Is there a particular revenue target you're not meeting? Have you thought about why not? So it's asking those 3 or 4 deeper questions, focusing maybe on a KPI or behavioural matter that the business wants to address. So, for example, it could be, I had a classic situation where they came to me and said, oh, we need leadership training for 50 people in a town in North Queensland. I said, why 50 people? Oh, we've got some issues there with the manager. But once we asked those 3 or 4 key questions about how is the manager operating at the moment, what kind of support are they getting, what's the team structure like, we found out that it was one person that the manager was having problems with, and it wasn't the manager. It was more about getting some mentoring and coaching for that individual and the manager to be able to work together. So by unpacking the issue, you get to understand a lot better. The other thing is, you can also, another clue I'll give you will be that ask them, is there someone already in the business that is performing at that particular level they would like the others to perform at? So is there a role model? Is there a benchmark or a measure already that they as a business would like to have others meeting? Once you have that, then you start designing and structuring a package, a program, an intervention around that sort of benchmark model, and therefore get the others, hopefully via that formal or informal, whatever approach you take, the blended learning approach, to come to that level. So that's another way of getting an understanding of what is it that they really want to achieve and what outcome they're desiring. Most important part for me has always been the measure of success. It needs to be articulated up front, and you must always be clear in communicating what they desire and making sure that that's captured, so therefore you know what to achieve. So again, it's all about communicating, capturing, rephrasing, revisiting as an ongoing process. I hope that's helped out anyway.
Yeah, and Sarah's actually saying, I agree, having an example of what success looks like is a massive help, absolutely, knowing what that good outcome is. Con, tell us just a little bit more about measure of success. So some people in learning and development who've maybe got that consulting hat on, they've got that business outlook, that might be something that they know and understand really well. For other people who are maybe a little bit more concentrating on instructional design or day-to-day delivery, it might be an area they're expanding into. Tell us what measure of success is and why it's important.
Well, basically, in a nutshell, it's all about, it's about the outcome you want to achieve. And then it's about starting from the end and working backwards to designing your program. So, if you want to take Pritchard, I suppose, and look at the business result and work backwards, so the level 4 working backwards. So it's about designing and taking the whole instruction design approach, whether you're applying the model, whether you're doing some agile designing methodology. It's about understanding what is the outcome. So if I was to touch it, feel it, understand it at the end, am I looking for a 10% increase in revenue? Am I looking for a change in our people cases going from manager and staff disputes from 20% down to 10%? So it's about identifying some of those key measures, working with the business saying, okay, how we can then start moving down the process to design and develop something that's going to be able to get closer to meeting that standard. And the most important thing for me is always not L&D evaluating, it's the business telling you whether you meet your outcome or not. L&D is very good in evaluating itself and very good in making some great song and dance about its interventions. For me, and another process I use about performance story reporting, get the story from the business, get that story into your process, and then start developing that story as part of an outcomes-based report about what actually was delivered and what impact did it have. Anyway, I love rambling on about this. Sorry, Joe.
No, it's all really good, useful information. Issy.
I love this story, and I think this is a wonderful example of how, sometimes you don't need a course. You don't need to take that success and turn it into training for other people. But what you can do is share that story with other people through different means of communication, and then people will learn from that. People that are willing to take that on board will listen to it and will think about how they can implement it where they are.
Brilliant, thank you. And if you tell us a little bit more around that. Oh, go on, Con.
Yeah, just say, no, I was going to say Izzy is very correct. And when we're talking about communications here today, guys, and really storytelling, and Izzy, you'll know this better than all of us, is storytelling is a great form of communicating. It's just that, we've all loved growing up with grandpa telling us a story when we were young, or grandma for that matter, and then we've all sort of resonated with that sort of approach that we can all empathise and start to engage and listen to that message that's coming through from that story. And I think storytelling is just a very, very powerful communication tool that we should all be using, adopting in a lot of ways, whether it be with a CEO or whether it be with in the training session.
And I think that any learning is actually part of the story. Because you're taking people on a journey. You're taking people on a journey within that organisation, and the leaders are going on a journey with that organisation. The organisation itself is going on a journey. And so as you think of learning as a journey, as a story, and if you think of even as the KPIs as part of that, then suddenly you've got this wonderful equation that everyone can relate to in an ideal world.
Definitely, and I think storytelling is a really interesting area, because I know when I hear people talking about it on a stage and a keynote and how we should do it more, I sometimes kind of go, really, how can we do that? But then I think down to those nuggets of, here's my one sentence that I'm sharing of my experience, and how, I bought my first iPhone because I was told a story, basically. It's like, yeah, it actually has a lot of power. So, Neville, welcome back. I know you're having some BT connection issues. Gosh, you haven't had fun today, have you, Neville?
I'm sure it's going to change any second.
So, Neville, we've been talking about kind of the point of getting to what the business really needs. And Sarah had asked that question earlier on about what tips do you have to get to what the real business aim is. So what's your experience on that, Neville?
I think number one, absolutely ensure that the business has defined its real purpose, not just to make money, not just to be philanthropic or whatever their purpose at a very, very simple level is, but why does the organization actually exist? Once we've really defined that, then we can help them to understand, okay, so how does the intention of what we now want to do relate to that purpose? What are the key results that we're going to achieve from whatever it is we're going to do? What are the critical actions required to achieve those results? And then, okay, so now we understand the critical skills, knowledge, behaviors required to achieve those critical actions. Robert Brinkerhoff wrote the success case measurement of impact approach. Inside that system, he has an impact grid. Those impact grids are very, very helpful in terms of working from top down in helping the business really define their aim and intent. So that would be one thing. I'd like to pick up on the storytelling though. I think that's absolutely right. And you can storytell in any number of different media. But I think the process is one where when you bring communication and learning together, you recognize that actually you're going through a process. You're engaging, you're infusing people, you're equipping people, you're enabling them, you're energizing them, and eventually you're affecting them into a new form of action. And through that process, communication and learning is going hand in glove. And through that process, there will be moments and there will be stories that really add value to the process for people. I think that's great. And if you listen to the really good comedians and how they tell a story that seems to last all night, yet other bits come in, that's kind of a really clever way of keeping attention. And Sarah, you mentioned that storytelling can keep attention for longer. That's kind of one way of doing it. But going back to the business, yeah, the aim is it has to relate to intent.
Thank you. And I think that business acumen, that going back to the intent, is such an important part of what we do in L&D. And to recap on the storytelling, I do remember reading somewhere, don't tell people what to do, tell them a story about what you know, because then it's up to them how they interpret that and how they apply it, which I think is really useful.
You know, one of the things that that we've learned over the years is people learn the most when they are being challenged, when there is something new to be achieved, and actually we don't really know the answer, so we kind of have to work it out. And then all sorts of sharing happens within groups that enables that to happen. And I guess our probably downfall in previous years was that we never really picked up on what those stories were, what that shared learning was, and actually took it wider. And there's a challenge for those of us within L&D, I think.
Well, it's interesting, actually. I was reading a Towards Maturity report from 2014, and it was, I can't remember the name of it exactly, it was something like the Learner Focus Report, something like that. And it was really interesting that they did lots of different research with learners, about 2,000 learners across private businesses. And they found, and I don't quote me exactly, but something like 82% of those learners said, I'm ready to share what I've learned, to tell stories, to share those learning nuggets, however it might be. And then when you asked L&D a question, it was something like only 18% of L&D staff thought that actually people had the ability to be able to do that. So there's a real disparity between, yeah, I want to do it, and L&D going, oh, no, I'm not sure you can. That's how I interpreted it, certainly. So I think that's kind of interesting. Now, Ryan, you're on our webinar, and I know you work with Issy at Nancarrow Partnerships, but Ryan, I know you've got your microphone there today. So let's try and unmute your microphone and get your thoughts, Ryan, because we always want not just our fabulous speakers, but we always want to have thoughts and input from all of you guys. We've got the chat window to do that. So Ryan, let's just unmute your microphone. So you need to go to the top left of the screen and press that microphone button to unmute, and just let's get a couple of your thoughts so far.
Hi there.
Hi.
So,
What do you...
an interesting point I was thinking about. So, we were mentioning about storytelling, and storytelling, sort of a story comes out of an experience. So, how can you sort of I know we're talking about learning primarily in larger organizations, but how can you provide experiences to the organization such that they have more stories to tell? So it's not just a learning campaign for 1 year, but it keeps going on and on inside the organization.
Ryan, great question. Thank you very much, Ryan. That's an absolutely great question. Issy, go ahead. You know Ryan very well.
I do. Hello, Ryan. Thank you for that. I would say that really it links to the vision of the leaders within the organisation. So your directors, your leadership team have got there for a reason. They have, hopefully, a plan for the organisation. They should do. And the stories should all link into that. But also part of the skill in storytelling is essentially making it viral. So in history, the best stories, the most lasting stories, such as fairy tales, we all know them, they adapt over time, we all have our different versions of them. And actually what you can see when it's successfully carried out within organisations is people want to get involved. So if, for instance, say the example that Con shared earlier, one department says, okay, we've achieved this, what you want to happen is another department to go, aha, but we have achieved this. And then keep that ball rolling so that essentially you've got this culture where teams are challenging each other and engaging within this learning communication in very much the same way that they do with their friends outside of work. And taking it viral and getting people thinking about their job in a different way.
I completely agree.
Thank you, Issy. Con? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to add to you.
This is the trouble sometimes we have just that little bit of delay. Okay, so Ryan, please go ahead with your comment.
So my previous industry was more in the retail, specifically in the outdoor sort of outdoor retail industry, and you can see it a lot in different companies where, for example, some companies provide training to their employees, but they don't encourage them to use their training. Now, for example, if I'm talking about a different industry, but if you're selling a hiking boot, you can teach an employee to sell that hiking shoe, or else you can give him the actual hiking shoe, take him trekking with it, and then he will really know by experience, and then he builds his own story on how that boot worked for him personally. So it's more about sort of getting that learning into a personal sort of, I don't know the word.
No, I think experience is a good word, Ryan. Thank you. Con?
I was going to say, one of the, I don't know if you guys got them there, you probably did the Euro. During the Euro, they had a couple of the French players talking about their experience of winning the Euro, and they were actually telling a story about what they experienced, the enthusiasm, the euphoria, the occasion itself. And it goes back to what Izzy was saying. That's a story that was a number of years ago, but they've reused it and retold it to create that engagement. And Izzy is very right. It's about taking a success story in the organisation where we've achieved some major business success, and then reusing, repackaging that to sort of say, well, you know, how are you guys gonna go? What are you guys doing? How do you think you can achieve and match something like, if not match, or how do you think you can actually start moving towards this particular outcome, similar to what we've done here? And by the way, this is how we did it. This is a process of when it took. This is what we learned. This is what we found out on the way. How can we learn from that experience? And I'll use that Euro example really good, because by getting those players to talk about their experience, it gets them others engaged, it gets the crowd engaged, it gets everyone really committed to the cause.
Thank you, Con. Nev, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the idea of stories and sharing them around the organisation through whatever medium, whether you've got it internal social media, whether you're actually formalising the bringing of those stories in, or whether you're just letting them flow. The big key is to get people excited to learn and to go seeking those stories. I mean, if they're excited to learn, they will seek the stories and continue to try and look at ways they can personally impact their own performance and their own life, really. And they'll get that from other people and listen to them in exciting ways. The danger I think we have at the moment in the industry is understanding where the line is, understanding where getting people excited to learn is a good thing, but getting people to feel they need to show that they're excited to learn maybe not such a good thing, because then there's the door open to bullying people into doing things at times they probably shouldn't need to. So I think there's a balance there that we kind of need to make sure when we're encouraging this type of sharing, to ensure that it's real, relevant, and acceptable.
I absolutely agree with you,
Thank you,
Neville,
Neville.
and I think that's where it's got to be curated very carefully.
Correct, yeah.
And Issy, tell us about curation. What is that? What does that mean in learning and development?
Gosh, that depends who you ask. I know some people I work with will have a very different opinion to me. I would say that when you're curating, you're looking at the bigger picture. You're looking at the tools that you got and how you're using them to get where you want to go. So if I give you an example, an L&D manager that I spoke to a few weeks ago was talking about how she was combining her learning programs and connecting it with the way she communicated with different teams, the times that she communicated with different teams, when she got the leaders involved, and essentially kind of managing that process to support the outcome of the learning. To me, that's curation.
Okay, thank you very much. And Con, do you have any other thoughts on curation? Because I think that's an area where you've had some thoughts, and I know you've written a couple of articles recently about it as well. So what are your thoughts, Con?
Geez, your timing is impeccable, Joe. Just posted my link to my blog, so there you are, the link to the KVM of curation. Look, curation is probably one of the, and we talked about the most important skill in L&D, and whether communication is one of them. I think it is, but I think side by side with that sits a number of other skills, and one of them is curation. Curation is a skill that if L&D is not yet employing or adopting, well, you better get onto it, because it's going to be something that's become very relevant to you and very important to you as you progress down the track of, developing your training courses. Because, guys, I hate to disappoint you, but content is no longer king. It's all about context, and context is all about curation, or curation is all about context. Anyway, whatever the case may be. So curation is a key skill. Deploy it usefully, deploy it wisely, but also deploy it in a way that meets, again, the outcomes of your organisation. I've got more to say. You can read my blog.
So can I ask you about that, Con? Because to me, I mean, there's key elements of communication, and part of it is curation. It's timing, like in comedy, and in sales. It's all about timing. It's all about pitching your message. It's understanding who you're talking to and how you talk to them. Is that, to you, are they all important parts of communication and curation?
Yes, they are, but I always, when I'm looking at curation, Izzy, I'm always treading carefully, because, and I wrote the blog about the biases of curation. It's important to understand when you're internal, it's a bit maybe different, but when you're a consultant or looking at it from a different perspective, it's important to understand where people are coming from when they are providing you with curated content or curated material, or are doing some curation on your behalf. I think it's important to know what people are interested in, what value they're adding, and how they're adding value as part of your broader understanding of how you want to take that content going forward. And the process I've used, and I've talked about in the blog, is called triangulation, which is very, especially when we come to an evidence-based approach for learning, always be mindful that you need to get probably one or two other sources to substantiate what you're about to talk about or what you're about to put out there with your classroom or with your organisation. In a sense, so it's important, but it's also about being wary about what it is that you're going to put out there.
I was in a talk last week where Elliot Macy used the term learning producer as opposed to instructional designer or curator. I actually quite like the term learning producer, simply because if I look at modern day launches of big blockbuster films or anything of that ilk, it comes out, the communication comes at us from every possible type of place, and we choose which of those sources of information we pick up on to actually go in the end to the cinema and watch the end product. And I think that's kind of where learning needs to learn a number of tricks in terms of, hey, the individuals are going to actually, they're capable of identifying where they're going to pick the stuff up. We've got to get cuter at producing the options for people that generate the end result that we're trying to get to. And that's why it's important to really understand why we're doing it, and then look at the people that you work with, look at their dominant energies, and understand where you need to get the message out there in a number of different ways. And that's my idea of curation, is almost, rather than necessarily curating into a box, it's creating out of a box and letting go.
Every curation.
Some great points
value.
here about curation, all sorts of different angles.
Not adding value. If you're not adding value, then all curation, there's a number of ways, but the most important curation is the one that adds value, whether it be a perspective, whether it be bringing a number of pieces of content together and providing a collated view and then adding to that in some way or other. But if you're not adding value in some way or other, then you're just collating information, which is what a lot of newspaper services do, just bring some information together and just put it out there as news, when really they're not adding much more value to that. Anyway,
you're
great
right.
chat on curation. Probably a separate session there, Joe.
Oh my gosh, we could do so many conversations come out of this. Let's kind of move into wrapping up. We've got around about 7 minutes of the session left, and I want to move in just a moment to asking all of our audience and also kind of our speakers as well about kind of what are we going to do from this discussion, what are our action points that we're going to take forward. So that's where we're going in a moment. To have a think, guys, we're going to be sharing some ideas on this discussion. I've had a little light bulb moment, and I'm going to do this because of it, and action points. We're going to come to that. But let's just have a few wrap-up thoughts from our speakers today. So Issy, first of all, you know, we've talked about, is communication the most important competency for somebody in L&D? What are your final thoughts after our discussion?
My final thoughts are that it is extremely important. I still think there is a lot to look at around actually what does communication mean and how is it changing. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, and I don't think we should get distracted by communication as an end goal. But I do think that there are so many aspects that we've brought up, and we could go on for hours talking about this. I know we could. To really look at, you know, how are L&D, as L&D managers, how are we communicating at the moment? How could we communicate more effectively? And I think it's a crucial aspect to your success.
Thank you, Issy. And Con, what are your final thoughts on this topic about communication being the most important competency for L&D?
Look, L&D is in a people business. People love to interact, people love to chat, people love to talk. I think communication is key to our business, so whether we're internal L&D department, we're external consultants, wherever we are, I think communication is key. But I do agree with Issy, it's not the be-all, end-all. I think, you know, we talked about other things like, you know, curation is another skill that is very relevant to L&D practitioners. But having, you know, said it and discussed for the last hour or so, Communications combined with some other aspects of it, whether it be storytelling, very, very important if you're going to be a successful L&D practitioner.
Thank you, Con. And lastly, Neville.
Hi, I'm kind of getting this input-output thing. I think that the greater the quality of input into L&D, the greater the quality of the output from L&D. And I think we therefore, coming back to the performance consulting point that I saw raised earlier, I think it's absolutely key that we understand why we're doing things. For then we can communicate for the right reason, in the right context, with the right intent to the right person at the right time, and then create the right results. So I think linking communication and measurement and results and intent and purpose and performance, those are the skills that bring it together, and we have to be able to communicate that that's the way we add value.
Thank you, Neville. So thank you to our speakers. We're going to come off webcam now, because what I'd like to do is to get all of us to share some reflections on this. Now, we're just going to practice a different tool in order to be able to do this, and it's the drawing tool. So let me just switch that on now. Everybody should be able to see that drawing tool, and I've got a diagram here on the screen. Let's go and practice that before we do some actual reflection. You've got a T text tool. Click on that. Click on the whiteboard, and you can perhaps type your name, for example. And then if you click again, you should reveal that to everybody. So let's go and have a play with that first of all. And if you can't get it working, guys, it's no problem. We can always use the chat window as a backup. It's no problem at all to do that. But let's go and make sure that we can try and get it working. And practicing and playing with some other tools as well, which is all good. So I can see Con, Issy, Pamela, Sarah, Lorna, Laura. You can see you all playing there. So you just need to click the T text tool, click on the screen to write your name, and then click again, and it will share it for everybody to see. So guys, you've done a great job there. And if you've got any trouble with it, you can always have a practice and a play. Well done, Naomi. Well done, Charlotte. Let's go into the next slide and actually kind of have a think about this and share on the screen. What is it you're going to take away from this discussion, and what are you actually going to do about it? So go and share some kind of learning point, action point that you're doing. And if it doesn't work on the whiteboard, no problem. Just share it in the chat window instead. So you don't have to use the whiteboard if you don't want to. I just think it'd be really interesting to know, you know, we've spent this last kind of hour together. What is it you're going to take away and actually do from today? So I've shared that I'm going to focus a bit more on stories, so type away if you want to. Okay, so we've got a few things that people are sharing. Somebody has said business focus. That was one of the things that we talked about quite a lot today. Somebody has said communication is key from designing to delivery. Make sure we link to the business results and with them the what's in it for me. Somebody has shared look closer at curation and how I can use it in learning. Yeah, there's loads of material out there to go and look at. Somebody has said spend more time considering the end before focusing on the how. That's so important. That's really a really important way of turning our L&D around to make sure we focus on the business. Keeping it simple, using newsletters. Take a look at Julian Stodd, RE Stories and the Campaign Learning Model. Yeah, Julian Stodd is a great person to go and look at for social learning, all sorts of other stuff. Somebody sharing investigate curation, so brilliant ideas on the whiteboard. Some of the things that you shared in the chat window. We'll review Show Your Work, Working Out Loud, and Jane Bozarth. I have 2 pages of questions that I want to discuss with my colleagues on communication, our skills, but more importantly, what we are trying to communicate to the company. And I definitely will do more storytelling, and we'll look at curation, as this is something I was not really aware of. Guys, what awesome things to be taking away from this session. Thank you so much. And speaking of thank yous, let me just say a huge thank you to Con, to Issy, and to Neville as well, especially Neville with all those technical problems, you poor thing, but you made it through. I was really pleased with that. Thank you so much for your insights and your thoughts. Now there's a links section at the bottom of the screen here, guys. You can just go in and copy and paste the whole lot if you want to. It's got contact details for Neville, Issy, and Con. It's also got where our next webinar is and so on. So our recordings will be available on our webinars page, including this recording. So Michelle, for instance, said, you had some connection issues. So you're welcome to go and look at the recordings, and I'll get this recording online soon. You know that you can continue the conversation on Twitter. There's Debbie, our editor, has done a great job, and also Campaign Learning. Thank you so much for that. At Nancarrow Partnerships, done a great job on tweeting. So go and review those for some key learning nuggets and continue if you want to. Our next webinar, next month on the 11th of October, it's all about how we kind of manage the bit of tension between we having learner engagement, we need to make sure our trainer is on board, but we're suiting the organisation needs as well. So we're really looking forward to that one too. So thank you very much, guys, for all of your time, all of your thoughts. And thank you very much, Con, Issy, and Neville as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant. And thank you guys for your enthusiasm, your communication, your suggestions, your sharing. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you very much, guys, and bye-bye.